objective is to bring honor and glory to God through wise stewardship. We all give money to this church believing that it's going to be used properly. And so part of this plan is to think ahead, to identify needs, and to invest in them wisely, not just throw money here and throw money there and waste what God has given us as a congregation, but to use it properly. We also have the goal to bring honor and glory to God through bold trust. If we do things that don't make us feel just a little bit uncomfortable, we're not pushing ourselves far enough. So part of what we're doing is saying we want to push to a place where we're a little uncomfortable, because that tends to be where God's work happens. And if all the decisions we make leave us in a very comfortable place where we don't have some indecisiveness about it, then we're probably not pushing far enough to the edges of God's mission. So we want this to have an aspect of bold trust. And then finally, we want to continue to meet the needs of our local church as we move in those bold ways. We don't want to be so overextended in all of these other areas, in global efforts and in national efforts, that we can't provide basic ministry here in our local congregation. And so the balance of those is where we try to aim as a long-range planning committee in putting these items together. With that, what we bring forward this year is something in two phases. One, a ministry emphasis. We recognize that our adult groups are lacking. And by adult, I mean from college age through the oldest, maturest member that we have. And what we want to do is we want to invest mainly people and time into this area. We want to set aside some resources where we can create some new groups. We have a huge need for a college age group of some type. I'm going to use the word group instead of Sunday school class because some of this is going to be non-traditional, because these groups require some non-traditional means of outreach. So we'd like to focus on groups with college-age students, with young couples. We also have some people who are interested in doing what we call reading groups, where you read through a book together and you just kind of discuss the content of the book. So the goal would be to expand our adult group ministries and create new ones in areas where we aren't currently meeting that need. Some of you are in Sunday school classes, and they're wonderful classes. But if you look at our Sunday school attendance and our worship attendance, we have anywhere from 100 to 150 people that only come for worship. And what we want to do is we want to provide some way to disciple them in a group setting. And so thinking out of the box and some of the ways we do that is going to be part of this emphasis. Also in our ministry emphasis, we're going to put in place a regular leader training time, where every other month or once a quarter, we bring all of our leaders together. Sunday school class teachers, group leaders, major committee chairs, the leaders of our deacon teams, and we do training so that we're not just expecting people to know how to operate in our local church, but we're preparing them. We're bringing us all back to focus every now and then to say, this is the central thing that we want to be about. And then how do we equip you to do what the church has asked you to do better, so that you can feel equipped and those who put you in that place can trust you, knowing that you're getting the training that is necessary to serve the way God's called you to serve. A third area that we would focus on in that ministry emphasis is to create a clear assimilation plan. That we have an idea of how do we get somebody who just drives into the church parking lot, how do we bring them from that moment to being a leader in our congregation or sending them out to serve somewhere else? Because we have prepared them, we've discipled them, we've gotten them focused on the areas that they need to. So rather than that just being, well, whatever works, we want to have a clear plan so that new believers, old believers, everybody in between, that when they come into this church, it's not, well, good luck finding what you need. That our goal isn't just on a growing membership, but our goal is on discipleship, helping people grow, helping people understand their faith better, helping people love Jesus to a greater degree. And so we would focus a lot of effort and energy on a creation of that type of assimilation plan, so that everybody who comes to this church gets to experience the genuineness and the love and the care that so many of us have experienced over the years. Because we have a lot of members who come, they sit in a worship service, and they don't get to feel that experience. They don't get to live into that because we don't have a very direct plan to get them from one place to another. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that who we are and what we do best, people experience that. And so a lot of the ministry emphasis will be on creating those areas. And so I'd encourage you, if God has placed a special need on your heart, we want to bless that. We want to catalyze that. We want to get that going. And so if something on this list stands out, I'd encourage you, just talk to me, talk to Rick, talk to Tamara Lemon, who's our Sunday school superintendent. And our goal is to get people connected where they feel God is leading them. So that's the ministry emphasis area. We would couple that with the emphasis on infrastructure, buildings. Because we have some needs that we've identified that we think could be met by just making some alterations to the building. The first is the renovation of the chapel. And the goal would be to focus on the creation of a multi-purpose meeting space. We don't want this to be specific to any group in the church so that a wide range of people can gain access to it. So that if one group uses it on Sunday, another can come in, use it Monday through Friday, and it's flexible enough to accomplish that purpose. The main alterations that would be included in this renovation are two things. One, the removal of the pews, and two, the removal of the front rail on the stage over there. That stage is a little bit different than this one. There's a wooden rail in the center of that stage, and we would remove that just to give it a more open feel. If you have the opportunity to go worship with our youth some Sunday nights, that would be very useful for their purposes, and we could go on and on about that small change would make a big difference in the function of that room. In addition to those alterations, we would add these items as renovations. You see the list there. And I would affirm all of these amounts are rough, very rough estimates. So our goal is not to get caught up in those dollar figures tonight, because some of this stuff may cost more, some may cost less, but based on the rough estimates that we received, or in some we just kind of guessed at, in all honesty, they're not meant to be specific figures. So if you disagree on how much something may cost, we appreciate that, and we would probably say the same thing if we understood that particular issue. So these are very rough estimates. Since we removed the pews, we would purchase 150 pew chairs. Pew chair is a metal chair with a very thick cushion on the bottom and on the back. They're stackable. They link together so you can actually create a pew from the pew chairs, and they would also give us some flexibility. So if we wanted to use that space for a baby shower, or somebody wanted to have an anniversary party in that space, those chairs could be used around tables. And you'll notice that we would purchase some banquet tables. By banquet, we just mean circular tables. That we would have circular tables to use in that space so that as a multi-purpose area, we would have the resources to fulfill all of those purposes without having to move things from one part of the building to another. The goal is that space has everything that's unique to it. And if you're going to use it for a purpose, everything you need to use it for is in that space. So the pew chairs, some banquet tables. We would also have the whole room painted. If you've gone over there recently, we do a disservice to that space based on its current state. So we would spend between $5,000 and $6,000 on painting both the chapel and the space behind the chapel. So everything on that floor, we would get a fresh coat of paint on by the same painter who's done work everywhere else in the building in the last few years. In addition to painting, we would update heating and lighting in the space. We'd keep the baseboard heaters just because they work well, and if we upgrade them to something new, it would cut our utility costs. And we would do some lighting upgrades if anything needs to be replaced. The goal would be with the lighting to try to keep it as similar to what's there as possible. And then finally, we would add audio-visual equipment. So a screen, projector, and a new sound system. We do our summer movies throughout the summer. That would give us the possibility where we could do those movies year-round. because we had the facility and the resources to accomplish that. So that gives you an idea of the type of outreach that we're already doing that space would service. Based on rough estimates, we think the total would come right under $24,000 to do the renovations in that space. In addition to the chapel, we would also bring forward the idea that we convert our existing breezeway. If you've noticed, we don't have a gathering space. And so the question has been asked a number of times, how could we add that without any type of major expense? A major expense meaning building a whole new building onto the building. And so the proposal we would bring is to convert the breezeway into a lobby space. What that would mean is closing in that breezeway, and you'll see the first item listed there is an additional drive-through. So we would come off of the back of the building in a drive-through that would actually be wider than the existing drive-through. We would lose 2 to 4 parking spaces, but because we're closing in the ends, we would actually add additional handicap parking space along the edge of the building. So any parking spaces we lose would be balanced out by the spaces we would add along the edges of the building where people don't have to drive anymore, so we can use them for other purposes. But this breezeway would come out, I think about 20 feet is kind of the early estimates, and we're still working on the concepts there. But we would still have a place where if it's raining, you can drop off your family. If you need to drop something off at the church and don't want to park in the parking lot, you can pull under the breezeway. We're going to make sure anything we're removing, we're also replacing so that we can still meet those needs. But as we build that drive-through on, we would close in the existing breezeway. The 2 end spaces would be double doors, and then the 2 middle openings, as you're looking from the existing entrance, those would be double doors as well. And then we would put windows in the other opening, try to make it try to bring as much natural light into the space as we possibly can. And we would do all have the finished work done inside and outside. The major expense other than the drive-through would be flooring in that space, because it's pitched for drainage. We would have to do some possible concrete work and other things to get the flooring that we needed in that space to look right. But those would be the major expenses. And furnishing, the goal would be to run cabling to that space so that if it could turn into, theoretically, a crying room for mothers. That if a mother had a crying baby, she wanted somewhere to sit with that baby, that space would fulfill that purpose, and we would have displays in that space where the service that's going on, we could run to that space. The idea is also with the audio-visual equipment in the chapel, that if we ever had the need for overflow seating, we would have all the cabling in place where we could accomplish that in the chapel area as well. But in the breezeway, we'd run the cabling, and then we would have to do some HVAC extension work to get heating and cooling out into that space. So the basic concept is to close that in, make it into a lobby area where we can have a welcome center. We can just gather as a congregation and not feel as cramped in our existing space. The funding request, because that comes to a rough total of $40,500. The funding request, I actually need to make an amendment here. Rather than $85,000, we would come for approval for $80,000. And the reasoning behind asking for more than the estimates is that we all know that estimates always tend to be low. So rather than coming back time and time again to ask for more, we would ask the congregation to offer that $80,000 with the idea that there would be a very stringent reporting process for all of the expenses, that the stewardship committee would have regular reports telling them how money has been spent, what it's been spent on, so that we're staying within that budget. You're not just giving us a blank check. You're telling us, yeah, we're okay with this, now move forward with it, and we want to hear back what's going on. If there's any major additions or major changes to either the chapel renovation or the breezeway conversion, we would come back to the congregation and we would say, okay, this came up, we think this is an additional need, or we don't think we should do it this way, we think we should do it that way. And that would happen in our regular business meetings. But the process would be that we're showing you that you can trust us. that you're giving us this opportunity, and we're not just willy-nilly going and spending the church's money, but that we take a great deal of responsibility in what we've brought to you, and we want to make sure that that is coupled with the trust level from our congregation. And so there would be a regular reporting process, but the main proposal that we would bring is for an $80,000 funding approval, and the stewardship committee's looked at that, and they say that's fine. That doesn't take us to a place where we don't have cash on hand in case other things come up, but that puts us in an okay spot. As we've done before, we also bring some future ideas, mainly because when we bring the complete idea, hopefully everybody's less shocked. But the future ideas would be the repair and the extension of our parking lot. And really the only way we can reasonably extend it would be towards the road. And so that's something that we continue to talk about in the long-range planning committee about, our parking lot is starting to age and crack more. We need to think about possibly repairing it, and if we're going to do a repair, also consider maybe expanding it at the same time. And then a second would be access to our playground and improved surfacing. Rather than having to buy mulch every year or two, investing in some better surfacing and investing in the access points to the playground so we're serving our children well, and we're making sure that that's an inviting space. And so there's some things just to think about. We may bring them next year and maybe 5 years before we bring them, but we will want everybody to be thinking along the same lines, so nobody's surprised and says, well, I didn't know about that. The idea about bringing future concepts. Last year when we met like this, we brought up the future concept of the chapel renovation. That's to prepare us all to start thinking through, what's that going to be like. Right? So that's, in a very quick way, what the long-range planning committee would suggest in a ministry emphasis area, with the chapel renovation, and with the conversion of the breezeway. We're going to have questions, but I've had a lot of time to think about what we're proposing tonight. I've been here 13 and a half years. I remember the first time the idea came up to do anything to that chapel. And I remember how divisive that idea was. At the time, I didn't fully understand it. I'll be honest with you. I was a younger man, and maybe my pride drove me more than listening. Over the last 13 years, I think I've come to a better understanding of the feelings that exist in reference to that room, that building. Right? So I want you to know that this isn't brought forward without understanding of who we are. Because I hope we think like that it's us. There's no groups here. There's no controlling bodies where one is fighting for their rights over another. We're one church. We're one church with one goal and one purpose. And if we don't think like that, then we will be undone. And I've been here long enough to understand, to sit and hear the stories of sacrifice, of people who are willing to put their homes up as collateral to build that building. I've been here long enough to hear the stories of your children and your grandchildren, for some of you who were baptized in the sanctuary, those of you who had children married in that sanctuary. So I don't bring this without a sense of understanding. But I also bring this with the knowledge that you know what sacrifice is, because that's what got us here. And this isn't an idea that doesn't lack sacrifice. So for many of you, what we're asking you to do is to sacrifice a space. Not your memories. Don't ever sacrifice your memories. But sacrifice a space for the purpose that this church was first started for, reaching people for Christ. Being a lighthouse on Timberlake Road for the gospel. That's essentially what we're coming forward and asking you to do. Don't approve this. Don't vote in favor of it for the youth. That's a bad idea. We're not doing this for the youth. Because, guys, I love you, but you're not big enough of a focus. This is for the church. It's for us. And so if we see this just as, well, we're doing this for the youth, you're going to regret it down the road. So don't make the decision based on that. And also don't make the decision based on the idea of, well, this is for growth. This isn't Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. Take that out of your mind. No major renovation necessitates growth. What necessitates growth is the heart of this people and our willingness to share and to invite and to live out the gospel that's changed us. So these concepts are not for growth, because we could do all this and we couldn't add a single person based on it. And you still need to be okay with your decision. So don't do it for the youth. Don't do it for growth. Do it for the mission of God. Do it for the original reason that this church was started. Because that's what's behind this. A desire for us to continue the legacy of ministry that so many of you place in that building and experienced in that building. We want to continue reaching people. We want to continue loving people. We want to continue making a difference in Lynchburg and around the world. That's the reason that you need to come to grips with in approving this. Because anything else, your nostalgia is going to cause you to regret. This is about God's mission and us playing our part in it and us being good stewards in that process. And so that sounded a lot more better. And my brain's just not working right now. That's not a good thing to say. Eloquent. There we go. It sounded a lot more eloquent over the years as I've said it in my head, right? But we're in a place where we have to make a decision. Is it going to be about us, in our memories, in our nostalgia, or is it going to be about continuing the mission? Continuing the attitude of sacrifice that is exemplified by many of these spaces. So, with that, any questions? I'm sure there are. If you could please come to this microphone when you ask the question. And like I said, we would like to keep the questions relating to these items. If you have a concern that touches something outside of these items, I'd love to talk with you after the meeting. We really want to stay as close as we can to the items that are being presented in this 2016 plan. Any questions, feedback?
Will anything be done to the floor in the chapel, or will it stay like it is? The
floor will stay like it is.
Okay.
At least that's what the initial proposal is. We keep the floor as is.
Louis, will the concept and all be available in the April meeting?
Come to the microphone, please. Can you come to the microphone?
I said, will a drawing or a concept be available for the April meeting as far as the breezeway and?
Of you mean the drive-through that we're adding?
In the lobby.
No.
Well, I don't know how you can get money value until you got a drawing or something out there to get it with. You got to go out and get quotes.
Well, I think that's
and the
and that
existing breezeway.
I'm sorry?
I said you got to get quotes on enclosing the existing breezeways.
Well, I think we have a fairly good grasp on what it's going to cost to enclose it. I think the one item that we don't have as many specifics on are the additional, the new drive-through, the new breezeway. And so, like I said, with the funding, if we find out it's going to be more, we would come back to the church and say, instead of $15,000, it's going to be $20,000 or $25,000. Do we want to adjust our focus here?
Okay.
And so, we wouldn't have specific drawings in April, but we feel like if it does go more, we would just come back to the church and say, because of what we found along the way, it is going to be more expensive. Do we want to reconsider it? or does the church want to approve whatever changes we need? Also, we have the space by requesting 80, and the estimate's only coming in around 65, that if something is off by that amount, we have space to respond.
Okay, all right. The only other question I got on the platform and the old chapel, we aiming on removing that too?
No, the current stage will stay. We
Okay.
will remove the carpeting. Our hope is that there's hardwood under that carpet.
Yep.
We can just refinish it, and the space is consistent from back to front.
The reason I brought that up, the hardwood floor, and I'm sure it's not running up under that platform.
Yeah,
You know,
we-
existing hardwood floor.
right.
So if you tear that up, it'd be costly, to try to latch on to the existing flooring
Right.
to get it up under.
Yeah. Our goal
Okay.
was to keep the aesthetics of the room as consistent as we can. That, we don't want to remove a lot of items at this point, to try to keep it looking as close to what you remember it as possible, and just giving it a greater range of flexibility.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Maybe a little more clarity for Ernie. We are in the process of getting architectural drawings and engineering specs and that type of thing for the drive-through before we send out anything for any kind of bids. So,
Do we have a time frame for start and finish, and what's going to be first altogether, everything altogether, one first, one next?
The goal with asking for all of the money at once is to be able to move as quickly as we can. We don't want to stretch this out over a year. We want to, if we can get it done in a 3, 4, 6 month period, we'd like to get it done as quickly as possible. But we will not sacrifice quality for speed. That we want to do it at a good pace, but we also want to make wise decisions in relation to contractors we use, materials we get access to. And so the goal would be to move as quickly as we can, but not sacrifice any quality in that process.
Couple of clarifications. One, the renovations of the chapel, the paint scheme, all of that will basically remain the same. We will have no carpeting at all. It'll all be hardwood, hopefully hardwood on, keep what's there, and I assume refinish that because it's gotten pretty rough, and by the time you take the pews out, there's going to need to be some refinishing there, and then refinish the deck of the platform to match. Is that the plan?
Yes, stay there because I'm not sure I got all your questions. But yes, the goal is our hope is, I'll use that word, once we remove the carpet, we'll find hardwood that matches the rest of the sanctuary.
Right.
And we would just have somebody come in and refinish those floors. The existing floor in the chapel was just refinished within the last 5 or 6 years. So we don't feel like there'll be a need to do the whole room. That was just done within the last handful of years.
While when you pull the pews out where they're
Right,
down,
yeah.
it's going to require at least some touch up.
Yeah, there
to do
would
that.
be. I'm trying to remember back when we had that done if they removed the pews. If they did remove the pews, then there won't be any of those touch-ups. So I think when it was done, the pews were out, so everything should have a consistent look. We may have to just touch up around where the edges of the pews were, just to clean up the floors, but there shouldn't be a whole lot of refinishing other than the stage.
So as far as the stained glass left in the baptistry and the overall coloration, which matches this coloration and so forth, that's all going to stay
Yes.
the same.
Yeah,
We're not talking about new colors.
There's
or
no
anything.
reason to change it. It would match what's there. If anything, we may do something closer to what we have in here. But we're not going to go in there with pink paint and paint the walls or do something psychedelic on the ceiling. We're going to try to keep it as normal as it is, consistent. We'll probably get the pew chairs in a color very similar to the cloth on these pews, just so it's consistent throughout the building.
Right.
So that'd be the one change right now. I think the pads are a green color. We would move towards this burgundy, just so there's a consistent color scheme throughout the building.
And as far as the breezeway modification and the addition of the drive-through, we're not going to start on the modification before we have the whole thing all
Correct.
planned out. So,
Oh, yeah.
so we won't lose the drive-through before we get the new drive-through
Right.
and all that,
Yeah.
right?
The goal would be to have the new breezeway completed before we start any work closing in the existing breezeway.
Okay, thank you.
The pews were removed. We took them out and put them in the garage. Now, when they come up, I think there are bolts that are in the floor that the pews bolt to, so they will have to be taken out or whatever.
Yeah, and I think we plan for some of those smaller repairs and adjustments as we go through. And like I said, we'll keep, if something out of the ordinary comes up, we'll come to a business meeting and let everybody know this has come up. You know, what's the congregation's desire as to what we do, or if it's a significant cost increase, we would make sure the congregation is aware of that.
I have a couple questions. One, what's the plan for the balcony?
The plan for the balcony is to do nothing, because with the stairs that go up to that balcony, if you haven't been up there, take a field trip and walk up them. The concern is that if we do anything in that balcony, any type of grandfathering that we have for those stairs would not be there anymore. And so we would have the expense not just of doing anything up in that space, but we'd have to rerun that stairwell. And we didn't want to touch that at all. So other than painting and just making it look cleaner, there won't be any major modifications. There will be a projector up there, because it'll be a single projector, center mounted, and there will be a screen that's motorized like ours that's hung in the center. All right, so that means when the screen is down, the stained glass window will be covered up. All right, but there's really any other option, the expenses grow exponentially when you have to do 2 projectors and 2 screens. So, the idea was we can put a center screen in, it's motorized, it'll be up the majority of the time, and it'll be mounted in a way that doesn't draw attention away from the current aesthetics of the room.
Second one is, what's the plan, or has any thought been gone into what's going to happen to the pews, and are we going to get rid of the organ or sell the organ or something like that?
We've had, Bobby and I have had some conversation about what to do with the pews. The goal would be to let people pick them, and we would give priority to the members that have been here a longer time. That if you wanted a pew, you put your name on it, and you have to find a way to get it home, but you're welcome to take it. That the idea was floated that we asked people to purchase a pew, but you've already paid for it. There's no reason for you to pay for it again. So if you want one, and you fall in the draft according to the proper number, we'd be glad for you to take it. No conversation was had around the organ, but I was talking to Dave Cundiff at lunch today, and Dave mentioned that Central Baptist, is that where you guys worked? Central Baptist in Evergreen, one of the things they lost was an organ. And so, a very simple act of service and sacrifice we could show is, one of the churches that were impacted by this tornado, we say, we have an organ that might get used once every 5 to 10 years. Can you use it? And so it just opens up a door for us to show our cooperative spirit, and possibly get some use out of that as well that another congregation might need.
If we have extra pews, they could use some pews too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But I have a feeling those pews will go quick.
I don't have any questions. I have a comment. I'm one of those members that we paid for the chapel with blood, sweat, and tears. Didn't know how we would do it. We bought bonds when we didn't have the money to buy bonds, but we did, and we paid for it. But my comment is, as long as you don't mess with the integrity of the building, I'm all for making the renovations. We need the space for other things. And you said, you made a comment, that it might not bring another person into the church. However, if we did outgrow this, I would much rather have a space over there that we could use for for one joint service, rather than having to have two services as we did before. So here's an oldie who's all for it, as long as you don't destroy my building.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
What's going to happen to the doors when you go down the steps? I mean, eventually they'll be just moved out?
We're not, here we go. We're not sure. Our resident expert in fire code, Mike Griffin, will probably pilot us through that to make sure we're within standards, to make sure, if the doors that we would add would look just like the doors that we've done in the building. We would use a very similar design just so we stay consistent as we move around the building. And then we would find out, Mike already said that some of the exit stairways from the balcony, we may have to, alter the design a little bit than what we were originally thinking to cover that. But once we had it done, we would have to make a decision on, do we want 2 levels of locked doors, or is it possible to remove one? We would probably need some type of fire door. That may be a possibility, but we would walk through that with the people with the appropriate wisdom.
Louis, speaking about that, the doors, you're gonna put doors in the new lobby. Put the doors in the new lobby that you're gonna put in. Why not just take the doors down and leave a case open on the one downstairs?
That was similar to Bill's question. We just want to make sure within fire code. We don't want to do anything that is going to violate fire code, so that we end up with any type of fines or egress, whatever the fancy words are, getting in and out of the building. So we just want to make sure we follow whatever code is there, and we don't do anything that seems practical to us, but the fire code just says not to do.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? If you have any concerns, any questions, please share them. If you don't want to do it at a microphone, you can do it privately. I have very thick skin. I've developed it over 13 years. But don't go into this with any type of not being sure. This is a new day for us as a congregation. I mean, we're making what can be a very divisive decision, and I hope some of you recognize the attitude in this room. That we're not here to be at each other's throats. We're here to recognize need and to do what's best moving forward. And so we want to equip that. We want to encourage that, and we want to move forward with an idea that we're one body with one purpose, and decisions like this can help us reaffirm that that's the truth. So, Bill.
What about the placement of pew chairs and banquet tables in that space? Going to be banquet tables on one side, pew chairs on the other side? Are the banquet tables removable and placed in there when needed, stored somewhere? What about the arrangement in there?
We would arrange the pew chairs so it looks just like the pews are now. That if anything, we would probably get a little more space because we could move them forward just a little bit. But the arrangement of the pew chairs would look exactly like the pews do now. And then when we used it for banquet purposes, the tables would be stored either in the overflow room at the back of the sanctuary, back of the chapel, or in possibly the old secretary's office. And so that we could move them back and forth. And these are lightweight tables like we have in the fellowship hall now, so one person can carry a table without a great deal of effort. And so moving them back and forth wouldn't be difficult. Now, setting up the chairs, you're going to need to plan ahead, and if you use that room for those purposes, you'll have to do some work. But those chairs will stack and store very well, and so if we needed to do that, there's enough space and flexibility where we can accomplish that. Nick, do you have a question?
Since I have the microphone in my hand, I thought I would go ahead and bring this up. You and I have talked about this before, but I want to get it on the record now. I changed the marquee out front, and it's a labor of love. It's a lot of fun, but it's getting old, and it's going to be needing replacing here soon. And I thought when we start redoing the front parking lot out front, repaving, that maybe we could go ahead and clean up those signs out front, the V-shaped church sign and the marquee that, if I'm not mistaken, that's the original marquee that was here. Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, I've been here since '88, and I know it's the same one that's been here for 30 years, so I would like for us to consider removing or redoing those separate signs and putting in one really nice sign to that you can see going west and east on Timberlake Road from both sides of Timberlake Road. I think that would really look nice. Any questions?
Any others? Charlie Parker would be happy with that because Charlie used to always complain that the front lot looked like a used car lot with all the signs we used to put out there along the way. So Charlie's probably shouting amen from heaven right now.
If you're going to use the chapel facilities for a banquet, is there kitchen facilities that could be used, or are you going to have to come all the way from the old kitchen?
Yeah. There aren't kitchen facilities right there, but down the stairs is the old fellowship hall where the youth currently use that space. And the youth kitchen has a stove and, do you guys have a microwave? A microwave. And so it would, just around the corner and up the stairs, we did have some marginal conversations about putting a kitchenette over there, possibly in the old pastor study, but the expense that it would be, we want to make sure that that's a way it's going to be used regularly before we invest in that. We didn't want to invest in anything more than we knew it was going to be used for. So if, 2, 3, 5 years from now, we realized there's a lot of that going on over there and we could use a small kitchenette, then we would bring that back to the church and say, we're going to do that now. But we didn't feel like we could justify that expense on the front end.
How about a dumb waiter?
A dumb waiter? Well, I can walk up and down the stairs for you. But hey, I'm not sure the design of the two buildings, if there'd be a possibility of adding that. We can certainly look into that. But I know the way the two the wing building and the chapel are joined, I'm not sure if the structure would allow for that. But we can possibly take a look and see if that may be possible. 2.5 weeks to think through it. Let's make sure we're thinking and not gossiping. Right? This is a one church moment, and we're either one church say no or one church say yes. But there's no use in turning it into something that isn't going to be about the mission of God. It's going to be about who we started as and who we're going to continue as, hopefully for generations. And so I'd encourage you, if you have a question, don't try to answer it with your own assumptions, because that's bad. And if you hear somebody bring up something that doesn't sound like what we've talked about tonight, please encourage them to talk to me or the other members of the committee, Bob and Tamara Lemon, Bobby Tuggle, Louis Bean, David Wilt, David Brown, who am I forgetting? Rusty Tryon. And so, if you have a question, please ask it. If somebody else brings up an issue, please send them to one of us, because we want to make sure everybody gets heard. We want to come to that April meeting and just make a decision that there's no need for a for and against, and let's hash it out before, and then so that meeting is just, are we going to do this or are we not? And then in that way, just make sure your questions are answered. Any final questions? All right. Mr. Tuggle, will you close us in prayer? He's going to get on me for doing this, but You're right.
All right, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we do thank for this opportunity of prayer. We thank you for this meeting that we've had here tonight, that whatever decision is made in April will be according to thy will. We pray now that you will be with us through this week and the 2 weeks ahead before our meeting. Give us the guidance that we need to make this decision. So we ask this prayer in thy Son's name. Amen.